Welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as always, is Mr. Matt Disher. And we have a guest this week, Mr. Jeff Hall. He's the National Employment Director for DAV, the Disabled American Veterans. So thank you, Jeff, very much for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you and a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me. Big fan of your show. So it was a real privilege to be asked to join you guys. So I'm pretty excited.
We're excited to have you on. Now, before we get into any sort of conversation, as we always do, we like to try to hit some news. And this one really hits home for our podcast and what we're doing. And on military.com, there is an article here that says, should veterans leave military service off their resume? So according to the Center for American Security, 33% of America's 6 million military veterans are currently working below their skill level. They cited the pandemic and the flooding of the job market with job seekers and the lack of opportunities out there that many people, not just veterans, but many people felt the pressure to just accept the first offer that came along, thus forcing many people into jobs below their skill level, not just veterans, but obviously we're focused on the veterans here. So these veterans are starting to feel like maybe putting that military service on them, on their resumes and bringing it up during interviews is actually hurting them and hurting their chances. Because of other studies, this article cites, says that most employers still honor the tradition of education into the job force. But we're seeing the turn. Matt, you and many people like you that do recruiting for companies that have a focus on veterans and military members, there are many places out there that see the strength in these veterans,
right?
You know, these men and women coming out of the armed forces and realize you don't have to go the traditional, I went to high school, I went to college, I got a degree, and now I'm ready to enter the workforce.
Right.
You can still find very talented individuals from veterans. So what would you say if you had a veteran reach out to you and say, hey, you know, I've read this article, maybe I'm not going to put my military experience on my resume. What would you say to that?
You know, I'm typically skeptical of these types of stories. I think sometimes they write these to generate content. I don't see a bad thing in putting your military experience on your resume. The only time that I would maybe encourage somebody not to do it, and this is something that stands true when hiring managers are looking at resumes, is that it might date you. And that's only if you were in the military a long, long time ago. And I realize that in employment practices, companies are not supposed to age discriminate, but they do. And so I'd say that's the only time that I would encourage somebody perhaps not to put their military experience on their resume. You know, there are stats that say the military population, obviously this would speak for itself on a resume, has higher rates of high school diplomas, higher rates of college education, higher rates of advanced degrees, et cetera, et cetera. But let's take for a second the person that doesn't have one of those on their resume. If they don't have a degree or an advanced degree, what their resume is then telling me with their military service is that they have also committed to something that most college students couldn't commit to or didn't commit to. For me personally, when I'm spending time in my job, if I have a hiring manager or a leader that asks for talent in a certain city, I will exhaust my resources such as LinkedIn and Indeed and different places like that. Some of our partners like Recruit Military. I'll exhaust resources to go in and specifically look for people with military background, and that's my job. So to leave your military experience off of your resume would exclude you from my search. And there are a lot of other people like me inside of corporate America that are specifically targeting people with military background. But I think through and through, there's nothing that hurts you about having served in the armed forces. In fact, it in my opinion, it helps you because it tells me that if you didn't do traditional classroom time in college, you've done non-traditional classroom time, probably more of it in a 4-year or 8-year or 10-year enlistment or commission in the military. Jeff, I don't know if you might have something to add to that too.
Yeah, I mean, those are all great points, and I agree probably down the line, and would only add, I guess, a couple of points, and that is, I think it would be I've been doing this particular role, which is helping veterans, especially service disabled veterans, connect with those employers who are seeking the talents and skills that they know they're only going to find in the military community. That said, I've learned a lot over the course of the last 6 years when we launched the program and how veterans move about, how companies move towards veterans in the employment sector. I don't know what generated the article, and I'm not going to beat it up too bad, but it sounds like somebody that's perhaps really in favor of the beating that traditional education is taking and sort of looking towards the military. There is, to me, nothing absolutely wrong, and I think probably quite the contrary. You should put that on your resume. It doesn't matter if you have college and military service, which is what I had. Mm-hmm. They're going to look kind of at what's recent, what are your skill sets and things like that. And so I think you would be seriously limiting yourself as for a number of reasons, but exactly what Matt just said. Companies are searching specifically for the skill sets possessed by veterans and their spouses, as an example. They search everything digital, how they do it, whether it's, posting jobs on a job board or whatever the case may be. If you take that off of there, you're not going to come up in their search. Keywording is I don't want to say magical, but that's what it is. People search by that, and companies are no different. So I would say if you have questions about how to put it on your resume, there's a lot of resources out there. Mm-hmm. But if you were just simply, as this article would allude to, what periodical did it come out of?
This is military.com.
I just don't. I don't see it, and I don't see the value.
Yeah, I don't see.
It's sort of taking it back, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, kind of a thing where we've done a lot in society to overcome and recognize the achievements and the skill and talent pool that the veteran community possesses. Right, we've done a lot. I'm old school enough, getting out in '92. Right, that a lot of the world has changed, and especially veterans being, counted mm-hmm. in the talent pool. College, there's nothing wrong with it, like I said, but there's a lot of sources out there right now that are talking about we need to do more in this country to recognize skilled labor and elevate and rise that. Like in other countries such as Europe or whatever, where people that go in the career path of plumber, carpenter, construction are actually placed higher, in the recognition chain than somebody that goes the traditional college route. So whether we see that particular part or not, we all know college is big money, big business. Mm-hmm. Military is what it is. I left high school. I went in the military. I learned this job. I did it around the globe. This is what I have to offer your company. You'd be wrong to leave it off. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I personally don't see the upside to it. It's an accomplishment. Your military service, you were dedicated. You accomplished things that some people never get the opportunity or just can't. Simply plain can't. So to take an accomplishment and leave it off your resume is, I don't see the plus side to it. If for nothing else, anyone that's served in the military has this great capacity to work as a member of a team or lead a team. Mm-hmm. And that alone is skill sets that I know employers are looking for. They're looking for people that can come in and work with others. Mm-hmm. We have the soft skills. We have the on-the-job training experience. Like Jeff said, you come in, you learn one specific job. There might be a couple different avenues to that job, but you learn that job, you become an expert in that job over your time in the service.
Right. And
it shows your ability to learn and things like that. And then the only thing else I would add before Matt jumps back in is if you're going to put it on your resume, make sure you're using vernacular that HR can understand. Don't get too in depth with the military terminology and things like that. Break things down as teamwork, team leadership, dedication, things like that.
I do think that the article might be making some false associations between the underemployment rate or the underengagement rate and people putting military service on their resume. So in other words, if you read it, if you're skimming through it, it's saying that 200,000 people leave the armed forces, and a lot of these people are underemployed or underengaged in their jobs. In other words, they're not correctly utilized in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's necessarily, there's a larger discussion at hand here that we have on this podcast, and that Jeff, you've had in the same network that I exist in. And that conversation is, how do you properly prepare for that transition and get plugged into the right opportunity, the right job? How do you sell yourself into the right opportunity so that you're not taking the first thing that comes along, so that you're not going, well, I really need to pay the bills, I'm going to go work at the gas station down the street instead of take the job at the investment firm mm-hmm. that I could very well be qualified for. So it's just it's a lot larger of an issue, of a question and answer, than what we could solve here in a couple of minutes during a discussion. But there's a lot more to talk about there.
That and so many of these individuals went straight in from high school. So their work experience was probably, a retail store selling jeans and t-shirts, or a fast food restaurant.
Right.
Or, washing cars, something like that. So really you're leaving off your most important job experience.
Right.
In reality. So
yeah.
I don't really see that. Matt, you said you had something else you wanted to bring up. Yeah.
Yeah, Alwyn Cashe. Mm-hmm. This is a gentleman who has been approved, or is moving through the process of getting approved for the Medal of Honor, getting his medal upgraded. He's a sergeant first class who was killed in action in 2005, or rather died as a result of injuries in combat. Story. But I've been aware of Sergeant Cashe's heroism, I guess, valor. I've been aware of it since long before this became a topic on the news right now. Mm-hmm. In short, this gentleman, they had some vehicles that were during an attack. They had some vehicles that were aflame, and he had some of his team members that were stuck in those vehicles. And essentially, Sergeant Cashe went back in repeatedly on fire, at risk of his own health. Covered in fuel, covered in flames, and was pulling his team members out of these burning vehicles. Not just once, not just quickly. It was repeatedly, and saved some lives, and was able to, he made a name for himself after that event, and he won a medal for valor. He was awarded Silver Star. They're upgrading it to the Medal of Honor. So that's a pretty big story. I remember, again, very specifically hearing about this a number of years ago, thinking to myself, like, that's not a Silver Star, that's a Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of stories like this. There are a lot of stories that go through the network that, for us, the common person out here reading the story, we would think that there are honors worthy of the Medal of Honor, or things and actions that they've done that are worthy of higher awards. But there's a review process, and fortunately these guys are going through the review process, and he's one of them. He's one of a few that's been upgraded, over the course of time. So that's good news. I was very excited to hear that, and I'm really happy to hear that he's getting the recognition posthumously that he deserves, and maybe his family is also looking forward to this as well.
Yeah, if you don't know the story, you can look it up on Wikipedia. It breaks down his actions that day. Roadside IED, vehicle with a bunch of troops in it, catches on fire. His uniform is soaked in fuel, and knowing he's putting himself in danger, he runs to the back of the vehicle and starts pulling soldiers out of it, thus catching himself on fire. And despite this, he continues to just go back into the flames to try to save everyone else. And then he's going to worry about himself. And sadly, he passes away. But it's good to see that the recognition is finally being sent his way for his actions.
Yep. Yeah, what happens is, as far as his story, which is an amazing thing, and everybody should check that out just to know. Mm-hmm. Heroes, and sometimes we throw those terms around in ways that don't quite captivate, or match what the person's doing. But when it comes to like military and what this guy did, and having been on one of those vehicles myself, and seeing, knowing the difficulty when you got guys that are trapped in the back and things like that, and he ignored his own safety, mm-hmm. which is central to many awards, specifically the Medal of Honor,
Right.
covered in diesel, caught on fire, as you mentioned. It burnt everything off of him. This is an amazing thing. It burnt everything off of him, except for the items that really wouldn't burn: boots, Kevlar helmet, vest, flak vest, body armor. And this guy was pulling people out, 1, 2 at a time, got all 6 of them out. Now, tragically, not everybody survived that. The important thing is to include Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cashe. They all lived long enough for their families to be with them, to spend one last moment.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, he gave the family that particular part, the parting, the goodbye. Is tragic. What happens in these types of things is chain of command doesn't have all the facts. It takes time through that review process, and some of them, it's not like an intentional, not saying that doesn't happen, like an intentional suppression, like in Cashe's instance, but it takes a while. Some people are confused by that. Why did it take so long? Why wasn't it instantly? Because there's a lot that goes into it, interviews, all that stuff. So it's just an amazing story. I'm really happy that it finally got through.
There's a series on Netflix called Medal of Honor. Mm-hmm. You guys probably have seen it. And it has, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 10 stories in there right now. It's just reenactments, and they're pretty well done reenactments. Mm-hmm. It shows, actually, one of them in there is Ty Carter and Cop Keating at the events at Cop Keating, and
former combat engineer in the United States Marine Corps.
Right, there you go.
With him in Camp Pendleton.
And it goes through that series of events at Cop Keating. But then there's a movie that came out called The Outpost, and it was kind of cool to watch the Netflix version of the Medal of Honor actions at that event. And then there's a whole movie that comes out. But anyway, these things are pretty well done, and for me, I love them because I love to read the stories, and I'm thankful when I ever get the opportunity to meet one of these recipients. I've met Dakota Meyer and I've met Flo Groberg, just to name a couple. My brother ran into Kyle Carpenter in a taco shop in Charlotte years ago and posted a picture of him and Kyle Carpenter, which is kind of cool. But these guys, I mean, in all seriousness, these guys are my heroes. Like, I'm not starstruck by anybody. I don't see celebrities in the street and go, "Oh, look, there's so-and-so." I see military heroes. I see some of the friends with whom I've served, and I look at them like those guys are my heroes. And so I just thought it was cool to mention that this show is on. I hope that Netflix does more of these because I think it was a really good showing to tell some of the stories, and a lot of them are from World War II and Vietnam.
Yeah. And when they have access, you mentioned the story of Ty Carter. That's semi-recently. Those individuals that were there that day are still around and still alive to talk about it. They do cut to those real-life individuals in between the action sequences to kind of get real insight as to what actually went down that day. If you're interested in the Alwyn Cashe story, his name, AlwynCashe. So
I failed to mention that Clint Romeshay also won a Medal of Honor at Cop Keating as well. So Ty Carter and Clint Romeshay. I knew I was neglecting something there. So two guys from the same event.
I was gonna pull you back in on that. Because I recently watched Outpost, and I got to tell you, for the Hollywood effect and everything like that. Okay, great. You got Clint Eastwood's son in there, playing Romeshaw and all this stuff. But to meet Romeshaw, to read his book, much different thing, right? So definitely recommend. But I'm like you, Matt. These are the Audie Murphys of our, certainly our generation and things like that. And I've been so blessed with a career helping veterans with DAV, but every inaugurational year, DAV has been fortunate enough to host a Medal of Honor recipient reception. The first year I was honored to go and be a guest of DAV, and we had maybe 20, 22 recipients, all generations.
Right.
The second time I went, which was the last inauguration, I was in awe. Like you said, it's not that a starstruck moment, but that's equivalent. I couldn't believe it. I'm doing a head count, and I was like 32, 33. We had over 30 of these living recipients of this procedure, and there's not a single one of them that isn't humble and thinks, we could easily just switch spots.
Right.
They don't feel heroic in what they did. None of that. But
no.
To have 30 plus of them stand to meet one, incredible.
And their stories are all just, I mean, when you listen to some of these stories, it's impossible odds. It is things that, I'll say this speaking for myself, like every man aspires to be the hero. Every little boy grows up or not every little boy, but little boys grow up running around in the woods with camouflage on, and there's the bad guys. Let's shoot at them. And, these are guys who, again, I've met Dakota Meyer. Dakota Meyer went repeatedly into gunfire in Afghanistan. And he said at one point in time, I think I read this in the book, or maybe I just heard it from a statement he made, but the air sounded like static. That's how much gunfire was overhead. The air sounded like static, and just went in and against all odds, him and another gentleman had to go in and try to pluck the team out of there, and they saved some lives. Same thing with Flo Groberg tackling a suicide bomber and taking him down to protect the assets, to protect the team. And the thing detonated. And then later on, he tells the story about how he woke up in the hospital and Jonathan Davis, the lead singer for Korn, was there. And nobody believed him. They were like, wow, those are some really good drugs. He's like, no, really. Jonathan Davis, the lead singer for Korn, was there.
I don't know if I'm in a hospital and open my eyes, if that's the first person I'm expecting to see.
I think Conan O'Brien was like, what are the sanitary standards of that hospital?
You're right. That's great. I had a interesting Medal of Honor case when I was starting out my career at DAV as a benefits advocate, and I ended up working at the Board of Veterans Appeals doing appellate work. And I had this case one day, and you got to go through everything. They come from all over the country to that one place, and it's been denied at the local VA level. Mm-hmm. It gets to the Board of Veterans Appeals, and you're sort of the last stop on the train unless it goes to the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claim. But at that time, I looked at this case, and it was a Medal of Honor case. And what are the odds? That's so lucky to have a Medal of Honor case. And then you think to yourself in a moment, why is there a Medal of Honor case on appeal? What is it? Well, the particulars of it, I won't get into that, but ultimately, he had been denied at the local level. And so I had the job of researching everything. And I was like, I couldn't figure out why they would have denied the benefit that they were looking for. And I read his citation, and I just kind of stood up in my tracks to read this. And I thought, this is a World War II veteran who they were pinned down on this mountain, and he just got sick of it. In his words, he got sick of it, and he ran up. The guys see this and they start to follow him, but he's too far ahead. So now they're throwing munitions to him because he's running out, grenades, whatever. And the enemy soldiers, Japanese at this particular battle, were receding from this one guy. And he was in full silhouette, as it was described by everybody around him, in full silhouette, taking fire, shooting back, all this stuff, to the point that he gets all the way up to the trench that they're in, straddles the trench, and goes after them. They all recede into a cave. He throws a satchel charge. It doesn't go off. He goes in and gets it. He comes back, refuses it, takes it, throws it in, blows the whole cave up. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers are lost in that, but hundreds of U.S. military are able to then go up.
Right.
That's heroism at its finest. But I argued this case and was politely told, we've kind of given him this. And I was like, nobody gave him anything.
No.
If anybody gave, he gave all of those people the second chance. That's why he's a Medal of Honor recipient.
Right.
And so we eventually succeeded. And, through the whole thing, they talked about two things that I really kind of beat him up about. that he was politically involved. So that showed that he was able to function in that capacity. And he worked at the VA hospital. Here's what he did, guys. He volunteered his time at the VA hospital to talk to other veterans, give them water, take a record over to this department. That's what he did.
Yep.
He volunteered, but they called that work. Secondly, his political ambitions only were every year, every inauguration, they invite Medal of Honor recipients to be recognized by the White House. Every president's done it. And he submitted a statement how, he would be in the hotel room. He didn't want to do it. He was only there because the award commanded him to do it.
Right.
And ultimately it ended up with how he could never leave the hotel. He was in shambles because he didn't want to relive it. He didn't feel like a hero, but this is bestowed on them. And I think that's a common thing, for several of these guys, but they do it. A Kyle Carpenter, versus a Dakota Meyer or something like that. One is going to be engaged in certain activities because it's the award, right? And they know and they understand. Where the other one says, hey, I don't want to do that. I think Dakota Meyer just finished paramedic or EMT firefighter school.
Yeah, I see him on Instagram doing firefighter school.
Still doing it, right? I mean, for the love of it, I suppose. But anyway, great people.
Another way to give back.
Your story about this gentleman, rushing the cave, it reminds me of John Chapman, who was recently Air Force tech. I think he was a tech sergeant, John Chapman, or I forget what his rank was. I'll look it up while I'm talking. But he was a combat controller and got dropped in Afghanistan on this hill. You could watch the video, the drone footage. You've probably seen that. It's all in it's all in FLIR, so you just see their bodies moving up the hill. But this dude runs out ahead of his team, and he's just capping bad guys running up this hill, and he's assaulting bunkers. And then he gets, at one point, as the story goes, he gets knocked out or knocked unconscious, like maybe an explosion knocks him unconscious. He goes down for like an hour and then wakes back up and starts fighting again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Is that the one that has the thermal footage?
Yeah, thermal footage from a drone. They're watching the whole thing overhead. It's the first Medal of Honor action to be recorded. But it sounds like the same thing, Jeff, that you're talking about. This, guy rushes a bunker on the hill, is just tired of it, And I don't know if I think John Chapman I think they were in the dark, and he was like, I'm just going to get the surprise. And really, if you look at, for us in the Marine Corps, that was always part of the doctrine was it's fire and maneuver. You're overwhelming the enemy with firepower so fast they can't react to it. Then you're just flanking them. So, but that's what he did. It's amazing because you can see it. It's recorded from a drone.
I love that in his words, I got sick of it. I've had enough of this. I've sat here too long.
And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of those stories, and please don't think I'm diminishing any of it, because again, I place these people way up high, the highest.
Oh yeah.
But a Kyle Carpenter as an example, I think he's just an amazing kid, right? And he's just so humble about, he's up in the turret on the Humvee, right? And you hear that metallic banking of a it's a grenade, and he shimmies down through the hole and lays on it. Who reacts that way, right? I mean, there's no coming back from that, yet he did, right?
I don't know if I would ever. Wouldn't
your reaction be to pull your feet up, maybe?
I tried to put myself in the same type of position. Like, what would I do? And I think it really is. I think it's one of those things that just happens. I don't think these things are planned. Again, you hear these stories. These guys aren't planning this. It's just the way they behave. It's just they're looking out for their team, or it's in their blood. They are. I mean, that's what makes them heroes. They're not acting like somebody else on TV. They are. I mean, they're legit. They're the real deal heroes.
If you, at 100%, and whether it's a moment like these instances or whether it's a lifetime. Because I'm thinking a lot more like this now because I'm old, right? I turned the double nickel this year, and so there's a lot of road behind me,
experienced
to look at, and we all, especially as guys, whether it's that moment or a lifetime, you think, well, I could have done that better, or why the hell did I do that, or whatever the case may be. And so there's probably a lot of those guys, even though they're bestowed with the highest honor and recognition we can give, you don't think for a minute they think, I'd rather have my full health back than a medal, right? But this, we could go on. This could be a whole thing, but it's they're amazing.
I think in those situations, as so many others in life, sometimes it just comes down to it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And Jeff, the story you told, I would probably say that individual had come to grips with, there's a strong possibility I'm going to die today.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I can either die laying here shooting from behind this cover, or I can take a chance. But there's a strong chance either way I might pass away. So I'm gonna pass away on my terms.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes making that call, you come to grips with that situation, and in that moment you make a decision that, looking back, people are like, oh my God, how could you ever do that? They just said, I'm gonna fight for it.
Right.
And
those guys may have been getting pounded by artillery and mortars and gunfire for like days and weeks, and maybe he watched some of his friends go down, and it was like, you know what, like to your point, Tim,
I'm just gonna sit here and let the next one hit me.
Yeah, like I'm gonna make this quick, and I would bet that a lot of them are not thinking that they're even gonna make it out of there. It's probably like, this is the way I'm going down, and I'm gonna go down with a sacrifice.
Yeah, and those wars, and again, constant barraging, weeks, months. Many of them had been there for 3 years in the muck.
Right.
They're sick of it, right?
Right.
To his point, I'm sick of it. And you know what? I if nothing else, I'm going to stop the suffering that I'm feeling right now. It's hot, it's sticky, I can't move. I'm beat up. It may not change anything, but if I lay here, it's probably not going to change anything either. So get up and follow me, right? One of those moments. And thankfully it worked out for him and not so good for the other guys. But
yeah, I mean, if you think about the general nature of, particularly let's take the combat occupational specialties in the military, the infantry and any of the other combat arms. If you think about the nature of these, I know a lot of people like myself, you go in for different reasons. You're not necessarily thinking you're going to end up being a hero, but there's a certain element of, and again, not to take anything away from anybody who has won an award for valor, but there's a certain element in military service in general of selflessness. You're signing a contract that most people will never touch, that 75% of American men and women can't even sign anyway. They are disqualified for one reason or the other. And then that contract, whether you do 4 years or 25 years, that contract's going to take you away from childbirths and children's graduations and relationships. And I mean, it takes you away from all those things. Now, I don't dare equate that to combat valor, but I do think that the general nature of service is it's exactly that. It's service. You're taking a piece of your life. In my case, it was 4 years that I don't get back, and I, of course I salute the people that do many more years than that. But it's all selfless. I mean, it's you might be doing it again for different reasons, for college money or for education or for the experience or for travel or what have you. But inevitably, you're putting yourself into a situation to serve other people, especially as a leader, to serve other people selflessly. And you don't always get the time to get, you can't just hang up the phone and go to Bed Bath and Beyond in the middle of Afghanistan. Like anybody else in any other job could. So,
yeah. To anyone that's ever gotten any sort of service medal, especially the Medal of Honor, they're absolute heroes. They are the top notch of what all Americans should strive to be. Absolutely. So, but Jeff, wanted to talk a little bit about you. You said you got out in '92. Mm-hmm. What branch were you in? What'd you do?
So, I was kind of lured in on Matt's story there. We all have our own reasons why we serve, and whether you're sick of it and you get up and go sign up, or whether you're on a hillside and you're sick of it and you save a bunch of people. I was in the U.S. Army. I served in the infantry, contrary to virtually everyone at the MEP station who said, don't do it. You're too smart for that. You tested really high. And I was offended by that, because then no one was going to talk me out of it, because I thought to myself,
Can't tell me what to do.
yeah. Are you telling me there's no smart people in the infantry?
Do you know who I am?
Right. So as it would be, I got what I wanted, and I joined, kind of against all odds in that sense. And I won't go into my story right now unless you guys direct it that way. But I served with Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, 41st Infantry, part of the 2nd Armored Division. And during the Gulf War, it was the Tiger Brigade. And we were the point of the spearhead going in, but we were attached with the 2nd Marine Division. Everybody has a cross to bear. Ours was the 2nd Marine Division. No offense, Matt, but we had to bring it along.
2nd Marine Division. I was in 1st Marine Division.
We needed a whole division of people that would take a pickaxe and try to, make a hole in a rock, while we were over digging in the more softer, practical areas, right? So there's no hasty position in a rock bed. There just isn't, right? But they said we were told to dig here. That's where we're digging. So very simple guys in that way, but so fortunate to be attached to them in all reality, right? I mean, when you're moving forward and you're in a coalition of 700,000, even if there's only whatever that amount was up front, 300,000, whether it was a Battle of Khafji or moving into Kuwait and being the only thing moving in front of you is not friendly. That's a weird place to find yourself, right? And certainly far and away from growing up in Farmsville, USA, in Northwest Indiana, growing up doing farmer work, then had a typical high school, out in the country, graduated, went to college for fine arts, got my degree, and then was working as a graphic designer. And I always had this itch about the military. Loved it. Loved my uncle's stories, my dad's stories, books, different things like that. But I want to tell you guys this, and I don't know how many people know this, but that I'm associated with. But what prompted me, to join? It was the movie Platoon, of all movies.
Oh yeah,
but it wasn't the movie, because that really doesn't glorify it at all, right? It doesn't put it in a positive light. But I was talking to Dale Dye, who plays the CO in that movie.
Yep.
And we had lunch together one day. He's an amazing guy who's worked on so many military movies. He's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his whole thing was how he got into that was wanting to make sure the military was represented accurately and correctly.
Right. Yeah.
Amazing guy. But we were talking about it, and he asked me about the same kind of a question about my military service. And I don't know it verbatim, but there's, if you've seen the movie Platoon, you know that Chris Taylor, played by Charlie Sheen, is always writing letters home to grandma. And whether it's one long letter that's just broken up through the movie, I don't know. But there's towards the end of that letter, because he was a college guy, and he was asked by a couple of the, why are you here? You didn't have to come. You volunteered and all this stuff. And ultimately, he wanted to find himself. And that's why he joined. And towards the tail end of that narration, but you can see it online, he says, I don't know, Grandma, maybe way down here in the mud, I can start new and rise from there and create my identity that I want, find myself. And I thought at that particular point, because the graphic design thing really wasn't working out, and I just wanted to do something that was big, be a part of something. I come from a large family, 6 siblings.
Yeah.
Then, you're part of athletic teams and things like that. So I was always part of a tribe. So never a lone wolf kind of a deal. And long story short, that was what stuck with me. And I was like, I need to go talk to a recruiter, because I'm just kind of in that revolving door mode right now. Right. So it ended up, I visited every branch, except for the Marine Corps, because I guess I just didn't have what it takes. But that guy followed me around. Nobody's
perfect.
Right. We can't all do it, right? Although Army did it last weekend, but I digress. Well done. It was an interesting moment when you realize I'm at some place in the world that I didn't even know of months ago. Right. And you're there, and you're doing your job that you've been trained to do. It's just in a different theater. Right. And that's kind of how we all are. And you just keep practicing all that stuff, break it down in the dark, put it back together, all these things that don't matter in garrison, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But when you get out in real world, you're like thankful that muscle memory and all those things come into play. It wasn't until sort of we're up, seeing all we were engaged with it. We've seen just the relentless bombing from B-52s and sorties everywhere, just massive munitions happening, right? And from a spectator standpoint, and not putting a human element into it, it was a spectacle, right? For days that we were watching this thing, and you're rubbing your anthrax arm because the injection hurt so bad, and you're just like, wow, this is amazing. And you, at that moment, you think, how did a kid from a farm end up here? And it just gets, I guess it just continued because I was with a group. We hit an anti-tank mine in a vehicle. It blew up. There were no casualties, no deaths. We were knocked around really good, and they had to piece some things back together. But yeah, I have a Purple Heart, from the situation, and I know it does mean something to me because I know the hurt and pain I went through as a result, not because of the medal, in the incident. But I never felt unlucky. I never felt anything other than just fortunate that my lease wasn't up.
Right.
And I get to continue on. And so beyond all of that, that does, not like I don't put that in the category of the Medal of Honor, but it does carry a prestige. It does carry a responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so fortunate that, I started working for DAV, the Disabled American Veterans, soon thereafter, because my injuries were severe enough at that particular moment that I had to be medically processed out. And I was okay with that. I really wanted to continue. And I'll be straight and say it this way. I loved the infantry. I loved everything about it. I hated stupidity, but everything has stupidity in it, right? The hurry up and wait is a real bad thing that everybody experiences in the military, especially when you're rucked up and you're ready to go. And then they say, stand down. And you're like, no, we're foaming at the mouth at this particular point. We got to go do this. Right. So, but I loved all of that, but I quickly made the transition without all the tools and resources that are available today, certainly, to your original point. But I've done a lot of jobs in DAV, and probably the strangest transition, even though I mentioned the one, like, how did I get here? When you're sitting as the point person for DAV testifying before the House or Senate Veterans Affairs Committee on behalf of our million-plus membership, or all veterans. Right. And you're answering, questions. It's a huge responsibility, and you think for a moment before the light turns green, how did I get here? It doesn't matter how you got here. You got the ball, and there's only 0.7 seconds left. Right. You're not going to score every time, but you just do your best, right? And you get up and you keep doing it. And so as a benefits advocate, helping people with their claims with disability or any other types of benefits was a huge thing. I mentioned, the Medal of Honor case was just one example. There are cases much more, different than that. But then I worked on the Hill on our legislative staff for 4 years, and then came, to our headquarters in Cold Spring, Kentucky, as the National Employment Director. And I would say this, all of them carry responsibility. Being the employment director and working with partners like Recruit Military that Matt had mentioned, working with them and going and doing career fairs and traveling around, excluding 2020. Let's just put that aside. That's an asterisk. It's not a Hall of Fame type situation, right, with an asterisk. But it's just, I love the employment arena in the sense that the landscape is changing like sand dunes. That's how quick it's moving, and veterans have to be ready. And I love the fact that we're trying to give them tools, resources, and everything. But it happens. So this current, we'll call it a class, this current class that is transitioning out of the military, the next tools and resources, or the tools and resources for the next class, is going to be a little bit different because the landscape changes so much. What are companies looking for? How are they looking for it? What's your resume like? Do you put this on there? This is not the flavor of the week. You got to do it this way. that to me is an incredible rush where I didn't have that incredible rush. I loved finding the piece of evidence to get a guy or a person the benefit. I love testifying and having them all zoom in on a point that I made, such as transitioning. At a testimony one time, the subject was TAP, Transition Assistance Program, and what the military was doing. And all 5 branches had a head person sitting at the table on the panel before me. And they're all huddled up. It was kind of a weird thing from the back of the room to see all this brass huddled up like this, because they probably wouldn't associate with each other outside of that moment. But nonetheless, they're all huddled up. And the only one that was getting it right was the Marine Corps. Kudos to the Marine Corps, because Marine Corps has smaller number, so it's easier to do it this way. But they said, no, everybody goes through that. No one has a choice.
Right.
Everyone does it. We make them. And I was like, that's a simple principle. But if you have 600,000 more of them, it makes it a little more difficult, right? But it's still, the sentiment was there. They were doing it right. And it was not necessarily that it could be a model for every branch, but it was great. And they really weren't getting the answers. When my panel comes up, one of the subjects was, or one of the questions was, do you have any recommendations? Or, they're always looking for that. And I said, I would put it out there like this. When I told you, I just shared with you and your audience, guys, that how I got into the military, and as weird as it was that I transitioned that way. My mom didn't necessarily like it, but anyway, I knew nothing about the military other than stories, movies, books, history. That wasn't even taught it a great deal in high school at that point. Now, probably not at all. But what I learned. When you get in there, it's a reality that's much different. Yeah. And I would have never thought when we were playing softball on a Sunday that we were going to be put on alert to go to a place called Kuwait that I'd never even heard of. We're like, where is it? So I've heard, of Iraq, but Kuwait, what is it? So anyway, when I enlist, everything, I was a little older. I was 23 because, as I said, I'd been to college and stuff. I was 23. First of all, people didn't understand that. Why are you not in officer school? Well, I'm gonna go to OCS. Well, my packet gets tossed out a couple of times because a I wasn't dotted or a T wasn't crossed, or my CO just said, as he said straight to my face, you're not officer material. And I thought to myself, neither are you, because an officer really shouldn't say that, right? I mean, you should be elevating and empowering people. But as it was, what you learn in boot camp, especially for infantry, you got 8 weeks, and then another 5 weeks for advanced infantry training. And then there was Bradley School that kind of went into, so about 15, 17 weeks, somewhere in there, 13 weeks. At the end of that, you have some form of soldiering ability. If nothing else, we're dressed alike and we look alike, so to speak. Right? We all got the ugly glasses. We got the cue ball head. We got the same clothing. There's not much differentiation, right? But you have some soldiering. You can do drill and ceremony. I was going to say DNC. Drill and ceremony out on the asphalt. You can, all those things that you guys know and many people listening know. You go through your career, now you feel more like a soldier. You end up in combat. I don't know that you feel more like a soldier, but you're just doing it. You're like the movie Dumb and Dumber, really doing it, Harry. This is really happening. Everything in front of us is not friendly. So that kind of makes it easy. Yeah. It's wide open. There's no trees to hide behind or anything like that. So, but then it comes time to out process, right? And I think, Matt, you made this, or Tim, you made this point earlier. When people get out of the military, they may have went into the military straight out of high school. The military may have been their first real organized job. Bagging groceries, working fast food, those types of things. Yes, that's true. But like their first real, I'm locked into this for whatever the enlistment term is, 2, 4, 6 years. So this is their thing. And I've encountered this so much in my job as the National Employment Director, going to these career fairs and whatnot. And that is this. It took you 15 weeks, in my case, to give me a soldiering ability, a basic soldiering ability. Why would you only give me 1 week to help me become a civilian again.
Right.
And so that is a long-winded way of what I was saying during the testimony. I shortened it up, but I gave him the essence of it, which was it takes you at one of the rawest MOSs that you have, infantry, it's the backbone, but even that takes 15 weeks or so. It may be longer now, but it takes 15 weeks. Why would you only give me a week to transition me, to help me become a civilian again? I mean, there's a decompression that has to happen there. Number one, there's all those things that we know and we talk about, and you guys have talked about on your show before in different segments. And they couldn't answer that. And of course, that comes in the form of a question back to me. What do you recommend? And at that moment, I said, I didn't have any hard recommendation from my organization. I didn't have any lead, and I just went out past the buoy. I got to be careful with what I'm doing here, because if I just make a hard line recommendation, Congress has a way of sticking you to it, right? Or sticking it to you also. But as it would be, I simply said, for me personally, in my own experience, this is what I think should be looked at. And I threw it out there, which was, you should have the equivalent amount of time to separate that you did when you went in. Even if you gave if I had a 4-year enlistment at 3 years and 11 months, on day one of the last month of my military, I immediately drop gear and go to civilian transition hold. I can grow a beard, I can do whatever, but for that month, that's where I report.
Yep.
And during that month, I have to go through all of this stuff: financial help, relocation assistance, all those things beyond career. And none of it's being done because they just want their stuff back and tell you to get out. Right? Give us our gear back and get out of here. Give us your ID, and when the door hits you, have a good life. We'll never get this guy's name right, and I hope not. But Nick Koumalatzos wrote Excommunicated Warrior. It's a great book to pick up for anybody transitioning for 2 reasons. I am an avid reader, but I am partial to bigger font now at my age, and double spacing kind of helps. This book is written in a larger font and double spaced, and so it's only like 130 pages or something like that. It's a pretty quick read, but it's this one guy's experience.
I like Audible. I like them to read it to me.
Audible, I was trying that on the planes going around the country doing these career fairs and stuff. Was asleep before takeoff,
right?
Every time. But I am thinking about, because I love James Earl Jones, and I think just like Sam Jackson, I want somebody to narrate my life, a voice like that. And I see that you can now pick up the Bible narrated as read by James Earl Jones.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. I just think Darth Vader, reading the Bible is something inherently interesting to me.
So, something you said a second ago, Jeff, and this was around, the military you take months and months. And I was going to say something like beyond this, that boot camp for us was 12 or 13 weeks. I was at Parris Island, and then I went to the School of Infantry to like combat training in Camp Geiger in Camp Lejeune, Carolina. And then I went to combat engineer school also in Camp Lejeune. So it's months and months and months of teaching. And I would say that those were the basic stuff. That was the basic stuff that we learned in those schools. And then I got out to the fleet, and I was in 1st Marine Division, Camp Pendleton, California, attached to Fox Company 2-1, which was an amphibious raid company. And I learned probably most of what I ever learned in the military in that element. Anyway, let's talk about let's use that as 1 year. That was 1 year from the point that I joined the military till the point that I hit that, maybe a final training evolution. It was 1 whole year. And at the back end, you're saying that the suggestion was that we have the same amount of time to transition out. And I agree that there should be a long-term of getting out of the military, a longer out processing process. The one thing that has always struck me as I've been in this, as a civilian, I've been in this industry, talking to people in the government, talking to people in the DOL, talking to people in the DOD, is that every 6 months or a year, whoever's running these programs transitions out, and then some other person comes in. And it's this constant fast evolution of rotation that one guy has a great idea. He's like, all right, we're going to stand this up. We're going to make it policy across the military branches. And then boom, he's gone.
Yeah.
And then somebody else comes in and there's no continuity. And I've noticed that I don't have the answer. I've been asked this question over the years. I've also testified before a congressional panel or congressional committee on Veterans Affairs for Economic Opportunity. I've had the same or similar conversations. I'm sure you've done a lot more of it than I have, but I've had the same conversations with the different nonprofits and the different the different organizations. I was on the phone with a representative of the George W. Bush Institute the other day, having the same great conversation about how do we, like, what's the answer? And I don't have the answer. I have pieces of the answer, just like you have pieces of the answer. But I wonder, in our last couple of minutes here, if you were the king of the world, Jeff, what would we do tomorrow to make this thing work, to make transition work, and how would we implement that? And I immediately, my brain goes to uniformity. There has to be a uniform process across the board. All branches, as you mentioned, the Marine Corps does it. All branches go through a same or similar process. There's it's almost like testing to get out, to make sure that you have the capability and the concepts of getting out. I don't know, any
yeah, I mean,
there?
things I like the testing thing, but first and foremost, no matter what branch, and maybe the Air Force has this already, but no matter what branch, everybody gets orange soft serve as they leave. That should be your last thing. It's the greatest thing ever.
I like that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they may be doing that already in their, I think they call them dining facilities. We had, if it didn't come out of your pocket, you were going to a chow hall. Right.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
But yeah, I think that there just needs to be and should be, I don't care whether it was a presidential commission or a commission or whatever that's uniform to branches. And I mean, we have no problem putting federal advisory committees together for everything, whether, for every department, DOL, VA and all these things. And I've had the honor and privilege of serving on some of these federal advisory committees. To do that, I think it just needs to be, I do like that notion of testing to get out, because if you're not ready, that makes as I have said, either whether it was in that testimony or different drop points in my career of saying, as soon as you get out, advice to a veteran is as soon as you get in and you enlist, you get your head shaved, you get your inoculations, you get your ugly clothing and all this stuff. Once you get to a unit here, you need to start transitioning out. You need to be focused on your job and do it the best you can, whether it was for 4 years or 24 years.
Right.
But mentally, you always have to be thinking this could end tomorrow. I didn't think mine was going to end.
That's a great point.
I wanted to continue. I liked it well enough that I wanted to pursue another enlistment. I already talked to my wife about it, and she knew where I was, here and here. Who knew I was going to come home on a medevac? Right. So the point is military is a dangerous place to work inherently, right? So mentally start thinking about what you're going to do after the military as soon as you get into the military, or maybe even before that. I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do this, but focus on your job while you're there. Do it the best you can. But on the other side, at the end of this, I would say, to your point, I think we need to really look to do right by our men and women that serve, regardless of the branch, regardless of the job. We need to help them transition and make sure you're giving us all the tools to come in and march around on post and go to war and do all these things. Why would you not give us the tools and resources? Because we're the future of the country when we get out. We're part of the same mix with college students and all of these other people. So don't set us up for failure, and don't get all mad and everything because your TO&E just went down by 3 soldiers because, it's their time served is up. My last first sergeant was one of the best mentors I ever had. And I only had him for a short time, and I had already been wounded and come home, and he was the next first sergeant. Chris Hutchinson is his name. And I will never forget him, but he unfortunately passed away earlier this year. And every December I would go to Las Vegas where he lived, and we would have dinner, 1 or 2 nights or whatever, and just think about all of these things and how close we are really in age, but how much I looked at the old man, right, when I was transitioning out, and he helped me with that. And I had done a painting for him for his office and everything that was a unit type painting, Bravo Bulldogs and all this stuff. And I had done this oil painting. And how we reconnected was he found me on Facebook and got my address. And that was sitting on my doorstep one day. I was like, what is this crate? And I opened it up, and it's that painting that I'd given him 25 years earlier or whatever. And it just was kind of an amazing thing. But God rest his soul. But you have great people like that help you on an individual basis. But we're talking, Matt,
right?
Pointing out what could they be doing? I think a longer transition out period, separating from, no, you can't go to that class today. You got to go to the motor pool because it needs to be swept.
Right.
We got to separate that and give it good and clean, and maybe make you test.
We're running out of time here, but I agree. I agree with everything you just said, and I also think that what better a recruiting tool for the military than watching exceptional people get out and make exceptional careers out of themselves. I've always said that. I'm like, it behooves the military to make sure that everybody has a successful transition, because it's a walking advertisement for your future generations to enlist or to commission.
College sports programs recruit on the fact this is how many individuals we've sent to the pro level over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Kentucky play basketball. 4 out of our 5 starters every year get drafted to the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Come to Alabama and play football. 18 of our 22 starters every year go to the NFL.
Yep.
It's a selling tool to bring in that next level of talent. If each individual branch had a track record of success from individuals transitioning out, it's just one more thing. Hey, you're young, you want to adventure, you want to travel, you want to learn something. We can put you in the infantry, we can put you in a tank, we can put you with artillery, we can put you with combat engineers. Right. You can be a medic, you can do whatever you want. We can travel around the world, do all these fun things. But when the time comes for you to get out, we're going to set you up, and you're going to go to that next step of your life ready, and you're going to find success.
I'll tell you just real quick, one more thing. When I was a kid, so my dad was in the military, my grandfather was in the military. I distinctly remember I was born for this. I was born for everything that we're doing right now. And I'll say this because I used to ask my dad as a kid, how come whenever I see a veteran license plate on a car, the car is always falling apart? It's always like the worst car on the road. And I made up my mind, probably when I was 5 years old, I was like, I'm going to go in the military and I'm going to have a nice car on the way out. And I know it sounds so simplistic and silly, but I think my thought process was people in the military, from my perception as a kid, people in the military were amazing people. And they had all these cool things that they did. And they should come out of the military and have these exceptional opportunities and have better stuff. Of course I was rating people based on their car, which is silly as a kid, but I was a kid. I was thinking like that, and I think that way today too. I mean, in my own job, I'm like, I could take this person who has raw potential and no traditional education, who was a machine gunner out of the military, out of the Marine Corps. But this person that I'm interviewing is a potential rock star. We just need to mold this ball of clay. And this person will be making $100,000 a year in 2 years. Let's do that. But the military doesn't do that for them. It has to be something that sets them up for the understanding of how to have these conversations. And part of that's interviewing. It's how you write a resume. It's how you come in and sell yourself. But it's all those little skills that have to be learned along the way. But Jeff, I hadn't considered the piece that I always thought after my 4 years, I'm going to get out and go do something. I hadn't considered the piece like, well, what happens if it doesn't last 4 years? It never crossed my mind until you just said that just now. So
yeah, absolutely. One last thing I would tell you guys to your point about the vehicles. This came up. I don't want to offend anybody when I tell you this little sidebar here, but people are like, they get so hung up on the where was your car manufactured kind of a deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I am pro-American made, all that stuff. But the comment was made to me because they see me drive in and out of the parking lot. Hey, I noticed, all you have are German and Japanese vehicles. And I just stood there like appalled, like, you don't understand what those are. Those are World War II trophies. That's what those are. So yeah, that's what because men fought and died so that I had the ability to do that.
Yeah.
But
I have a German car. Toyotas are also my favorite vehicle. I will end up in another 4Runner. The next generation 4Runner comes out in like 2 years. I'm getting one of those.
I have a Tundra sitting in my garage.
There you go. They're best vehicles in the world.
So
Hands down.
thank you, World War II veterans.
Right.
I mean, with things like the Skill Bridge program, it seems like some of the right steps are being taken. You know, that
They
you get
are.
6 month for the internship, things like that. That definitely helps individuals that get accepted into those programs have that time to transition. But Jeff, I think you made a fantastic point. Having a unit designed for, hey, this is your last month. This is where everybody goes. Grow your hair out, grow a beard, pierce your stupid ears if you want to, whatever you want to do. But every day you're going to show up and we're going to go over resumes. We're going to go over financials. We're going to go over, hey, we're going to practice interviews today. And that way, after that month,
Yeah,
it's not the 15 weeks it took for you to get in, but you have 4 weeks now of dedicated time getting ready for that next step. And these people are going to come out.
Right.
Yep. You got to complete these modules, maybe to Matt's point, test out,
Mhm.
be able to move to the next module and the next module. And again, I just think it covers everything from financial fitness to, hey, how's your relationship status? Is your wife happy you're transitioning out, or husband, or whatever, or education? You got to know. I mean, when they come to DAV and we educate them about their benefits, we are the first point educating them about their benefits. The government has failed already at
Yes.
that point. There shouldn't be that need from us, but we've been doing it for 100 years at DAV. We've always been that help, that assistance, whether it's in time of, helping them get their benefits, or helping them in a disaster, or helping them with like this situation that 2020 has been, the proverbial crap show it's been. But real things happened here.
Right.
People lost their jobs, veterans. We were enjoying the lowest unemployment rate.
Right.
And then it spikes up. But DAV was there to provide DAV COVID unemployment relief program. It's not a huge amount of money, but it helps people put food on the table and keep them moving forward.
Sustains them.
So,
Yeah.
Definitely check out DAV.org to learn more about the organization. Get involved, whatever capacity. Come to us for help, volunteer. We've been doing it for 100 years because of people like you. So we're going to continue to do it.
Well, Jeff, it was absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. As you mentioned, 1920 to 2020, the DAV has been around helping out veterans. So thank you very much for all you've done and what you continue to do. Thank you for everybody there at DAV. Matt just put the DAV.org there on the screen.
Scrolling
That's
across
great.
the bottom.
There you go.
Well, it was a pleasure being here. I appreciate the invite. I was not known as a filibuster for no reason. So I'm sorry. I get wound up about it. I'm very passionate about helping veterans and their families.
Jeff, that's why I thought of you when I'm thinking, like, who comes on this show next? Jeff Hall has to be a guest at some point in time. I am the worst. I'm going to say this before we close it out. I am the worst person. I get so busy during the week. I'm the worst person at booking guests on this show. And I always tell Tim, I'm like, Tim, I don't have anybody for Wednesday. So we do a pretty good job of holding it together. But for anybody listening, anybody who tunes into this, if you have recommendations, if you are yourself a recommendation, get in touch with us. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am one of probably 2 or 3 Matt Dishers on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Shoot me a note. We've had job seekers on here. We have had other veterans with whom we've served. We have policymakers. We have professionals. Yeah, we have nonprofit leaders. We've had one of everything on here, and we are just looking forward to the future of how many other conversations we can have here. We have great conversations every single time. So, Jeff, much appreciated being here with us today.
Well, I appreciate it again. And just to kind of close out my thought on it was there are people, I would probably shoot you in an email that might be a good fit if you hadn't already thought of them or reached out to them, whether they can do that or not. But I just think what you're doing is really important.
Appreciate it.
Conversation. Nothing happens without conversation. And to the point of the transition part that we were talking about, that everybody has to go through whatever sector. How did that end up? I didn't provide you how Congress responded to that. Where you have a separate unit, and for the last month or 6 months or whatever, that's where they go. Civilian transition hold. The members thought it was very interesting. The staffers are the ones that kill stuff immediately. Yep. So I had a guy come right up to me and he goes, what's a big idea? Throwing that out there like that, just like that. Well, number one, I knew he was an officer in the military. So let's just start with that. And the second thing, he said, it'll never happen. It'll never see the light of day because that costs money we're not going to spend. And I said, well, if we're going to spend any money in this country on any deserving group. You should be the most deserving group, and that's the men and women that serve this great nation. So that you could stand here and tell me it costs too much money.
Yep.
Great point. Absolutely great point. Jeff,
100%.
Thank you, guys.
thanks for being a fantastic guest. Matt, it's good to talk with you as always. As Matt said, if you are interested in being a guest in the show, or you know somebody that would be a fantastic guest on the show, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out. We're always looking for more guests. Make Matt's booking job just a little bit easier. Reach out. I know you're interested. If you're listening to this episode for the first time, we appreciate it. Hope you come back. Find us on any podcast platform. Subscribe. Please rate and review. That helps us get into the ears and eyes of so many other people. You can find us on all the major social media accounts. It's always a pleasure to do these. We look forward to doing this next week. And that's when we'll see you right back here next week on Beyond the Wire podcast.
Thanks, guys.